Okay, we are now live. Good evening to the fourth and final night of the Graze Debate 2. Hello to those that are new this evening, and welcome back to those that have been here on the previous nights. I would just like to kind of set the ground rules for tonight again. This webinar is being recorded, so do let me know if you have any problems with that. And please do chat on the right hand side. We're actually looking for a lot of chat from you guys tonight, just to help us direct our chat to make it relevant to you. So do just plug in away. If we don't know the answer to the question, we will say we don't know, but we'll try our best. Yeah, and Q&A, just interact with us through both means. Just thought I would do a little recap of what's going on. I mean, it's a real challenge to try and condense down what's covered essentially in 6 hours in one slide, but I'll do a slight recap now. On Monday night, we heard from the grazing pros. We've got James Drummond, back tonight, representing the farmers. And I think even Kalina and Tom might even be in the audience. And they gave us a great tour of their places, their infrastructure, talked about how their successes with rotational grazing, herbal lays. It was a fantastic night full of practical insights. On Tuesday night, you heard from myself and Lorna, covering the grazing how-tos. We discussed the importance of energy at pasture to drive performance. We discussed infrastructure, and I even probably bored some of you to death with a bit of chat about feed budgeting, as I like to. And then finally, last night, we heard a bit more of the rotational grazing science. I think we probably all we're amazed by the amount of work these system scientists do to try and capture all that goes on the farm in a scientific way. I think probably many of us are questioning the number of paddocks that should be used that is optimal for ewes and lambs pre-weaning after the work from Athene in Northern Ireland. And we saw some great pictures of the deferred grazing trials in New Zealand as well. We also have Sarah Morgan from Rothamsted back with us this evening. She's also been with us every night this week. So thank you very much, and will be a participant on the panel. So to set expectations, we will probably not go on as long as we have done for the past 2 nights. We're going to aim to finish at 8:30. I think I'm already getting in some of you guys in trouble from your other members of the family from keeping you over too long each night. And what we'd like to do is just hear a lot more from yourselves. To start us going, I thought I would just go around the group. So we've got Jack, we've got Lorna, we've got Sarah, and we've got James. And I've been very mean as I've tasked them to give us an insight into their key take-home message from this week. Only one. So I would like to start with you, James. Take it away.
Okay, so key take-home message. Probably based on a few things that we saw yesterday, was it, based on some of the trial results, that really, like, animal performance is key to these systems as well. It's okay thinking, right, I can go and I can grow more grass, I can utilize it, I'm going to up my grass growth and my output per hectare, but you also want to be concentrating on that animal performance as well. And I don't want to diss other people's studies or what's been going on, but we saw that 4 paddock versus the 8. Actually, the 4 paddock was outperforming, and with Sarah's, the set stock was beating the cell grazing. And yes, the output per hectare was a lot better, especially on the cell grazing system. The utilization was a lot better. But really, like, that time on farm is very important, and especially if you've got finishing stock lambs, that you're wanting off the farm quickly, and cattle as well, actually driving that daily live weight gain and get them off farm and making sure you're getting a good profitable enterprise and not run them late into the season when grass is more valuable and you're eating into it. So I think a lot of that, actually how you graze is quite important with that. I was a bit surprised with the 4 versus 8 paddocks being as sort of unfavourable to the 4, because really, if you're keeping it vegetative and leaving a good residual, that 8 paddock should be able to perform as well. I think maybe that residual is the key there. If on a 4 paddock rotation, if you've got to say 7 days in each one's a 21-day rest, it's maybe only that last day they're taking the residual down, so it's maybe dipping the performance. If you were doing that twice a week on an 8 paddock, then actually that's going to hinder the overall performance a bit more. So actually, if you were targeting a higher residual there, not making them clean up as much, you should be able to get as good a performance. And I mentioned we did a bit of work with sort of leader-follower systems here now, and that's a really good system to make sure that you are helping your utilization on farm and grow as much as you can, but not hindering that performance, because you can just take the very sweeties off the top, the very sort of top 25 to 50% of that available forage for your priority stock up front, and then have a slave mob coming in behind following dry ewes, suckler cows, wherever it is. So actually, if you're trying to get that cleanup and take your residual down, you're not doing it with a priority stock that you're going to hinder their performance. So actually, really try to drive performance on these systems is about how you manage them as well. And don't be too worried about getting a really good residual early in the season. So if the stock's got rejection sites, there might be a worm burden, it might be dirty pasture, there's maybe just something they're not wanting to eat there. You don't need to have it clean it up in the first few rotations of the season. Wait until you've weaned and get some dry ewes in or something to clean it up. And they're a good management tool to actually reset the pasture there to make sure you've got quality later in the season. But don't be too hung up and actually try to tidy up each paddock, because then you will hinder your performance. And I say ultimately, you want to be getting as much performance. If your daylight weight per animal is going up, your output per hectare is going up as well. So really just, be keen on monitoring and driving that performance as well as your grass growth and utilization.
Yeah, you see it quite frequently, people getting too caught up on how the pasture looks and forgetting what's most important is getting those animals growing and getting them away to ease that pressure later on the system. And I like that you brought up the leader-follower system as a means. I guess the tricky thing is in a research setting is they can't overcomplicate it with things like that. But perhaps later on, they could have sacrificed residual a little bit as a means to improve performance.
And research is a bit different to actually sort of what you can do on farm as well. And just don't be as keen on making sure you've got a lovely even field, because there's going to be reasons they're not eating certain things. And just drive that performance. And I say you don't have to get a topper out. It doesn't have to be money spent to clean it up. Like you'll have a stock class that later on the season can do that for you.
Yeah. Would anyone else like to come in on that discussion there, the 4 versus 8 paddocks? Anyone? Yes, Sarah.
Sorry. I kind of agree with what James is saying. So that's something that I've kind of learned in the process of getting used to the sow grazing versus the set stocking. And in the first year, we were trying to push the animals pretty hard to try and leave a clean residual, but equally having to balance the fact that they're growing animals. So in an ideal scenario, if we were at a bigger scale, then we would bring in a follower group to do the cleaning up. But we're hands tied in that regard. I've kind of learned to not chase the residuals so much to make it look tidy, so that we are getting that animal performance increased anyway. I would agree with what James is saying, that these systems don't need to look pristine and tidy. I mean, if it's working and it's getting you the results you're wanting, then it doesn't need to look tidy.
Yeah. Any other comments on that? I mean, I guess this is where like creek grazing, if we could make it work for sheep, would work really well, because then the lambs wouldn't be suffering as much. I guess I'm talking more later in lactation. Okay. I've just seen one question that's, oh, actually, no, I'll continue around the group. Lorna, what's your key take home from the week?
Yeah, very much along a similar stream as James. Pasture quality, is going to drive livestock performance. So don't get too hung up on the finer points. As long as the stock is doing, there's always another way to reset the grass. But using your plate meters or your sward sticks, they're just a really good way to have kind of half an eye on what's going to happen in a couple of weeks' time, with grass growth, so that excuse my French, the shit doesn't hit the fan straight away. And just there's lots of talk about herbal lees and incorporating them into the system, and absolutely a fan of them, and they've got a place, and they take a different kind of set of management skills. But we really need to get clover and a bit more diversity into our swards, from an animal performance point of view, but also from an environmental point of view. I think that's going to benefit us on farm. So yeah, pasture quality, whether it's just your grass swards, grass clover swards, or you're taking the next step into herbal lees and different mixes, it's high quality feed for good performance in your livestock. That's going to be where you make your money at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's almost like there's key points in the year where you should be focusing in on your pasture, maybe in the autumn, getting quality, getting the base of the sward cleaned out more then, when you haven't got so many high lambs and growing stock on the farm, I guess. And then in the summer, your focus should be back on what's most important, your stock.
Yeah, and I mean, there's lots of different theories, people have about rotational grazing in the summertime with lambs. Some people just find that it doesn't suit their system, and they'll maybe go back to more of a set stock system. So we can't say one way or the other, this is the right thing to do or this is the wrong thing to do. It's all about taking the principles and figuring out how it's going to suit your farm and your stock. So we better try. Everybody is in a farm scale trial on their own farm.
Absolutely, and that's why I needed to stress on Tuesday night, like that's all we can do. We can just give a guide and the principles, and then hopefully you can work out something that suits. Yeah, we've heard leader follower working really well with James and other farmers, and I've heard it working not so well in other situations. It's just, I don't know whether it's to do with stock behavior or what, but sometimes yeah, it hasn't been able to work as well in practice. And then in rotational grazing pre-weaning, I've heard some people move back to set stocking and seen the improvements, like over 2 kilos in weaning weight from going back to set stocking. And then some people have increased weaning weight from going back to rotational grazing. So I guess, yeah, it's more of understanding of the principles and measuring and monitoring what the outputs are to see and continually improve for yourselves.
Yeah, and you've got to keep the flex, give yourself the flexibility, because every year is different. When we were just discussing when the peaks and troughs in the grass season are going to be. So just leave yourself with a bit of flexibility, and but yeah, just monitoring your grass growth and speaking to other farmers or advisors or whoever is just best way to get your confidence. And also, well, you always pick up something from somebody else, don't you? And yeah, make it work to your own farm.
I think you nailed it on there to start with. You said just the quality, just making sure like your grazing quality. As probably just said, like some people are going back to set stocking before weaning. I mean, up to 8 weeks, no matter what system she's on, multi-species, like really old permanent pasture, it's all off mum's milk. So performance is fairly similar in lambs to that point. But from then to weaning, when the lambs are getting on pasture and that sort of real growth going up the weaning, that's sort of normally for farms around up the Scotland, our area, that's that sort of June period when grass is going to seed. So actually, if you're going into too high residuals, it's lost quality. If you take the residual too low, then you're going to be sacrificing the growth quite a bit. Whereas actually, if they're just picking on a set stock system, they're going to be picking a higher quality diet. So making sure your cover you're going on to isn't too far ahead of them, it's still vegetative and of high quality. And again, just don't hammer that residual with them when they want to have a really good high quality diet when they start taking pasture.
Yeah. Good, thank you. I'm going to move on to you now, Sarah. Key take home from the week?
I think mine so I know I'm on the science side of the fence, but from the practical side of the fence, I think it's just if you're thinking about taking on rotational grazing, to just start simple and work your way into it and be a sponge for knowledge. So you don't need to, split up your farm into loads of paddocks and have a big grazing plan for the year and stuff. Just start simple and focus on the principles and then adapt to your particular farm system.
Yeah.
And be open to sort of trying different things and adaptable, and it's not always going to go smoothly into plan, but it's a learning process.
Yeah, I mean, I think all you guys on Monday said that you'd made mistakes, you'd messed things up, but as long as you learned from it. I mean, you the lambs being 75 grams a day less on the taller grass grazing as evidence that, well, at least you're learning from that, and you're learning that's not going to suit your system. And I liked what you said, James, about just splitting a field in half, as it's just a good starting point, and seeing that and being sold on the benefits through that.
Yeah, keep it simple to start with, and yeah, if you've got the ability to monitor how it's going, even better. If you're weighing even just mob weights, not necessarily individually IDs, if you've got that ability to monitor how them changes you implement are going, you're going to see the benefits, hopefully.
Yeah,
I've yet to meet anybody who's started rotational grazing and has abandoned it. They tend to just expand the system. So
it's addictive.
Yeah, it's kind of. Yeah.
Great. And Jack, I've kind of made you stick behind the scenes more this week, but yeah, you've had the benefit of looking at everybody's questions and all the chat and things. What's your key take home from this week?
Yeah, kind of being in the background, just trying to absorb all the kind of information from everyone. It's been really great. But yeah, so to put it into kind of one sentence, it's clearly obvious that going down the rotational grazing line, you're growing more grass, you're increasing utilization, and on a permanent pasture basis, you're improving that productivity. Before you're invested in starting any reseeding and like that. So that was what I find as the theme of this message is to encourage new entrance to the rotational grazing sphere. That start simple, and I think when Kalina mentioned at the start about going to March and coming out of our winter period, just grazing off that old dormant leaf and increasing the quality of stimulating the quality of you getting the sunlight down to those roots. It's that sets you up for the rest of the summer and the grazing period. So it's a lot of tips and tricks now you mentioned, but that for me coming down to that period, I'm glad that advice has come as from you guys and girls coming in to start off on that. But equally encouraged by all the data as well. As someone who likes modelling farms, it's good to see the kind of the use of FarmX and other tools, AgriNet, etc., to put the farm on paper on the computer and then model these different scenarios to improve the farm and to enforce your thinking. And if you are thinking of changing, it's a good way to changing a system to model it, and then you can see the benefits of it. So, no, it's been interesting to stay in the background and see all the questions coming through. But I know this debate will continue past this week. There's a lot to learn. So.
Yeah, I think that's cool. Hopefully we can. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to write up a note afterwards and hopefully keep some of the discussion going. Definitely. Yeah, and the reseeding argument and the benefit, like we mentioned, of rotational grazing to the species composition. Sarah, you showed it, actually quantified it quite nicely, didn't you? Yeah, with the ryegrass proportion increasing and the benefit that means to your the longevity of the reseeds. Good, thank you. I really liked actually showing some evidence for, and it links in with the opportunity of rotational grazing and increasing leaf area and giving the rest period to increase the rooting growth. But it was nice to see from your work, Sarah, that this led to higher rates of organic matter increase in the cell grazing versus the set stocking. It makes sense, but it's quite nice to actually see it quantified.
Yeah, so especially in terms of the sort of newly coined term regenerative grazing / agriculture, I know we touched on this a few nights ago of, you know, is rotational grazing and regenerative grazing the same thing or not? But there's a lot of talk about sort of carbon sequestration and going forward possibly being paid for carbon credits and stuff. So having some sort of concrete evidence on your grazing management having an effect on the rate of increase of soil organic matter, and it is a proxy for carbon, is really exciting. And that's that sort of rate of change is been seen in just under 3 years of the experiment, but we need to ideally sort of continue it over the long term, because carbon can't be forever sort of sucked into the soil. There is at some point a sort of equilibrium, and we don't really have sort of data that kind of goes that far back because carbon sequestration is such a new thing. But yeah, I was really pleased when I sort of saw that the rate of increase was different on both the systems.
Yeah, it's good to see. Great. I'm going to have a little look at the questions that are coming in. So we have got Graham Lofthouse asking, have any of the speakers done any work or know of any work, the effects of mob size and stocking density on lamb and ewe performance in paddock or rotational grazing system? So mob size, stocking density on lamb and ewe performance. Who wants to take that one?
We run various size mobs. I think I mentioned on Monday, the main thing for us is actually how many we can handle in one go. So if we've got young lambs at foot, we kind of stick to that 250. So 250 ewes with 500. We did double up some one year, so we ended up with sort of 500 ewes with twins. And yeah, just a bit of a push, get them in the yard, and actually there was a bit of a knock on growth, but then we couldn't get them all in, so we chucked some into an adjacent sort of yard, and then they got weighed a few hours later and stuff. And actually, I think there'll be a bit of a discrepancy just in that time to wait, and obviously they've pooed all the way up the road and stand in the yard, they've not eaten anything. Yeah, it's just our facilities. Once, say we're running ewes, we just whack them together quite happily with massive mobs. Monitoring condition, I suppose, is quite important. Make sure the ewes can perform on that system. I'd imagine if your genetics aren't as suited to forage-based systems and you start getting into rotational grazing with big mobs, there might be more ewes in there that don't cope as well in the system. If your ewes are well suited to forage, I mean, it's just a monitoring tool, keeping an eye on that condition. And really, if there is any ewes that can't perform, they're probably not worth keeping, to be honest.
Yeah, you're constantly keeping the ones that suit the system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got no scientific evidence for any of these comments, but I find with sheep, they're funny creatures, and there's probably a little bit to do with how they've been managed and maybe even breed, about how comfortable they are being close to other sheep. But I definitely think, you know, they can adapt. So I think it's maybe just a case of them getting used to being in bigger mobs. And like say, James, you know, if you're monitoring them, you're going to see the ones that just don't like a lot of people or sheep, and ones that maybe do. So that's just maybe a crazy sheep theory, but I think there's something about the psyche of certain breeds of sheep and how they've been managed previously. There's maybe some behavioural scientist out there that can.
I've had this discussion Graham actually, and the theory is, but well, potentially in the wild, sheep are less like, you know, in cattle and cattle ancestors and relations, they're more likely to be in big dense groups, whereas sheep maybe less so. So maybe there is a more of a tendency for cattle to do well in bigger groups than sheep. Maybe sheep don't like their nearest neighbor as much.
Yeah, we see with our sheep that are out like on the hills that, well, you know, they're hafted for a reason, but they tend to go back to the same places, and the daughters go back to the same places, and they tend to hang out with the same pals. So you know,
they like familiar faces.
Yeah, they are. They
Yeah.
do. There is actually research for that. So yeah, but I think they will adapt.
Yeah.
As you start getting them used to being in bigger mobs. But yeah, you know, you need them to perform. So just again monitoring body condition score, and you know, how lambs are performing will tell you how that's
It
going.
can be stubborn though, and as you sort of mentioned earlier, the mentality of certain breeds. I was speaking to someone yesterday, they phoned us for a bit of advice, and our system, everything's homebred, so they've been on the system, they've been in big mobs since birth, they're used to it. He was buying in draft hill blackies to put on a rotational grazing system. So if you get a 5-year-old blackie who's going to be wild and lived on the hill, and suddenly she's going in a big mob, going around a rotation, I'd imagine that's probably going to be the most challenging change of mentality for a ewe to go through. So if they're brought up on that system from a lamb from birth and used to it, they're probably going to be a bit better than, a draft blackie. So good luck if you're listening tonight.
Well, that's what part of our system is, that the draft blackies go onto better ground and go onto a rotational grazing system. But usually there's always like a core that have been there from the year before, so they settle in, and we have very little bother with them. I mean, geez, you give them a 5-foot dike and they'll be over the top of it in no time, but they seem to respect the electric fences. So I'm quite amazed how they have taken to being domesticated, or they've maybe just cottoned on that it's a far better to be in grass all year than turfed out onto a heathery hill for 6 months. So
they do learn from each other quite well. You notice that when you're training them, don't you? It's best if they're in groups that know how to eat. Sarah, you've got your hand raised.
It was just to kind of back up Lorna's point about, you know, they're usually, if you sort of look on a hillside, they're kind of sort of spaced out, and they only really come together if they feel like they're under threat. So that's kind of their sort of mechanism for looking after each other, is they all bunch together, and then, you know, the ones on the outside can only be eaten by the wolf rather than, you know, picking them all out. And I think the other thing that possibly changes the behavior is the time of year as well. So probably depending whether, you know, they're pregnant and whether they got lambs at foot and stuff like that. Again, I'm not like an animal behaviorist, so it's only just through sort of observations, but yeah. And I think sheep have more subtle dominant behavior than people give them credit for. So I think we've got a sheep experiment going on at the moment, and you can definitely tell the dominant ewes to the submissive ewes. And I think just because their bodily language is quite subtle from the dominant ewes, I don't think it's sort of picked up as often. But that's just some observations I've done recently.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm conscious we're being a bit sheep heavy, so I worry about the more cattle interested people in the audience. Any comment on mob sizes with cattle, James? You're on mute.
Yeah, we aren't running a lot of cattle yet. I'm building numbers up, so our scale's fine. You see, there's a video in somewhere in South America. They were on our shifts on a huge mob of cattle. I mean, it looked absolutely fantastic. But I mean, there is people out there running massive mobs on like controlled grazing systems. And I mean, as you say, the sheep, there is dominant sheep, there's dominant cows. You're going to get that idiot that wants to go around and headbutt and bully the other ones. But you kind of think once that pecking order's sorted, they should hopefully be all right. And So yeah, there's countries doing it on massive scale, so I can't see it being too much of an issue. Think of a dairy herd going around, you get people 500,000 cattle in a mob in pretty short shifts.
Yeah, they're, I would say cattle are really just dictated by your handling facilities again, you know, what can you handle, and you know, what's your infrastructure for it, but they seem to be a lot easier to please, not so fickle.
I'm conscious as well, we are going to the maximum sort of end of the scale. It's the way we're talking. There'll be some people in the audience that will be talking smaller numbers of sheep and cattle. And I was just wondered whether anyone would like to comment on how you deal with rotational grazing with smaller numbers, so less than a, you know, in the tens rather than in the hundreds. Same principles. Yeah, same principles apply. Smaller paddock.
Yeah, same principles. You possibly run into issues towards the end of the season when you need to extend your rotation length, and ideally you're down to like half a cow in like you know, a small area. So yeah, but I've only got 1 hectare paddock, so you know, I'm limited by the area of land that I've got to graze. But you know, you can still do mobs of less than 10 just on a bigger grazing platform, and you'd be fine.
Yeah, and again, I think flexibility, isn't it? You know, if you're using temporary fences, you can, depend on how you know, you can make your paddocks to suit the growing season, if you like, whether it's more or less, or work around it. So again, it's just flexible, but really it's like you said, Poppy, it's the same principles. At the end of the day, we're managing that grass for quality, and it grows the same no matter how many sheep you've got. So, or cows.
How are we doing on the questions, Jack? I realise they're starting to rank up a little bit. Is there any that we should address right now?
There's 9 questions that are, or now 10. Yep.
Shall I take the first one?
Yeah. So Patrick's mentioning here, how do you avoid stalling the rotation during the lambing period when presumably you want the ewes to settle in one place during that time, i.e. with later lambing at a time when the grass is growing very fast? So,
yeah.
Good question.
It's a tricky balance, isn't it? Because you don't want to run into mismothering issues by starting the rotation too soon. So often people will only start rotationally grazing them about a month after lambing time. Some people drift lamb. I don't know if you've ever had any success with that, James. So moving the ewes that have lamb.
No, got like faff on of a lamb, and everything's tagged at birth and forwards accord and stuff. So we had to do quite a bit of handling at lambing time. Quite tempted for my beef flock actually this year. I've not got quite enough cover on the sort of main lambing paddocks where we do everything. But if I've been cell grazing some of these herb legume lays, are all split up into little cells already. They can actually 3-4 weeks rest in end of March, beginning of April. There's probably enough cover to put the bees over. And actually, if we're drifting them, there's enough cells, we can just catch and record afterwards when they come out. I think if I was trying to catch and record behind electric on small cells, you've got the risk of pushing things into the electric. But no, drift lambing systems kind of work it even better if you're not having to catch and record and tag things.
Yeah.
But yeah, we get the rotation going really soon after. Because we're catching everything, tagging and doing all the records. We'll place them into paddocks, and then after a couple of days, we'll push them paddocks together, and then actually we'll fill them up again, then we'll push them together, and then we'll start getting a rotation. Maybe to start off with, we just put 2 together and go back and forth, and you push them together, and suddenly you've got 4, and you've done that on a couple of paddocks next to each other. Farms planned out, so you can sort of know where to push where, and you just get your rotation going quite quickly. Some we kind of go whole hog and just go, right, well, we'll put you 4 together. But instead of, if you had, say, 8 groups of 50, instead of putting them all in and mismothering and that stress on the lambs, actually, if you're just putting 2 together, they've had a few days getting used to the bigger mob size, finding mum and more animals about, and then a few days later you push together. It just seems to be a bit less stressful. And you're doing that as your pasture growth starting to pick up, and you actually need to start getting a bit more grazing pressure on them areas. And it seems to work quite well. Just, yeah, but we'll do that from a young age, and we'll whack them over electric from a few days as well. They seem happy enough.
Yeah, so it's a gradual, like, building them up, and then they're finally in the main paddocks, like 3 or 4 weeks after.
Yeah, potentially even less than that, but yeah, but within sort of 3 weeks, you'd have most of them on the rotation there, really. It depends on the pasture growth. Sometimes where it's more permanent pasture, we'll be slower getting that rotation up and running. They're just behind what the younger lays are at that point of the year for growth. So we need to be managing that a bit better to keep on top of them. That permanent pasture, and even sort of into end of May, June, it's not going to be sticking up the seed head like them young lays are. So they are an easier thing to manage. So you can be a bit slacker on your rotation. But no, yeah, within 3 weeks, we'd kind of want everything. And they say it's just that gradual, a few days, and maybe you leave them for a week after you've mobbed them up a couple of times, because there's no pressure to get on and get them moving just yet on that bit of the farm.
And that's just based on eye, is it? The pressure,
pretty
like
much, like, yeah. You'll see what the grass is going. If you don't have to be measuring, it's great if you're gonna measure and manage everything. But if you're just getting into it, a lot of it you can do on eye. You can see if the grass is getting away or starting to bear off, and actually be able to mob up and rest and let some of that grass grow is as beneficial as trying to keep on top of it sometimes.
Yeah. And of course, I guess what helps is the fact that you've already been round the grass you're talking end of February, March time. So you've already got like that winter dormant stuff off, and then you're probably on, you're lambing on to what sort of centimetres are they going on to for lambing time?
Depends on the lays. We don't get round all the farms. We do have some fields that would be left, but ones that would have been mated the second cycle, so they would have been grazed a bit later in the back end. It's all permanent pasture, the wetter, heavier fields, so we can sometimes get on, but there'd be a bit more damage there. So some of it is just winter sort of growth. But say once you've mobbed up early on with that use, you can tidy it up. It's not like the lambs eating that. I mean, you've got a good sort of 5-6 weeks of lamb on mum before you really have to worry too much about that winter growth. But they're more productive lays. Some of them were sitting at 2,000 sort of 3-4 weeks ago, and they're starting to grow quite nicely now. So we'll nip them off, but you can be back on them after 5 weeks, and you could be almost up at the same level again if the temperature's right. There's sort of hybrid ryegrass and stuff in these mixes, so they're quite productive this time of year. But I say that all permanent pasture isn't growing anything like that until later in the season, really.
Thank you. I hope that's answered that question, quite detailed. Any other comments on that question? So making sure you're getting ahead of the grass is key. I mean, your lambing dates strategic to when grass is getting going, I guess, on the farm. When do you start lambing again? Is it?
Oh, a bit earlier. So I'm starting embryos in 5 weeks, which is a bit of a pain, but main lambing's in April.
Yeah, April. Yeah. Good.
But yeah, every season is different as well. That's the thing about this. Like you want to position your lambing so it's going to match your growth, and hopefully have that demand to start keeping on top of growth and shutting up and everything you do. But it can vary quite a bit.
Very much so in the spring.
It can be either the drought or the wet and the utilization's down, and I say it's just been flexible. But yeah, that winter growth, we won't necessarily nip all of that off. But I say we'll see daylight weight gain on herb legume lays and on really old rushy pasture being exactly the same. The milking off mum, them young lambs. So actually, mum's condition might change a bit in that period. The better the grass, the better the mum's condition is going to be. But if she's doing a job and milking, then lamb growth rates aren't going to alter at all really to 8 weeks. So she can tidy up a bit there and make sure it's better quality later on.
Yeah.
I was just going to come in on James's comment about measuring your pasture by eye if you haven't got a rising plate meter or something. The other indicator you can look at is the temperament of the animals as well. They'll kind of tell you if they're kind of bored of being in the same paddock or need to be moving as well. So it's a combination of both.
Beer can, a boot.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a rising plate meter, just any kind of consistent.
Animals are a very good indicator, though. they'll tell you when they want to shift, especially if they're used to being moved and stuff.
Yeah.
They'll start getting to the gate when they see the bike coming 3 fields away, expecting the shift.
When we housed the cell grazing ones, the winter just gone, they were in such a routine of being moved that whenever someone opened the gate, because they're in separate pens in the shed, they'd want to move through the gate. And it's like, no, you have to stay there now. Like, you don't need to move anymore. You're in the shed.
Yeah, you've got to be mean on them sometimes, because they'll eat what you give them, won't they? So sometimes of the year they might be bellowing and things, but you want them to graze it down a bit tighter. Okay, how are we doing? Any other questions we need to address right now, do you think?
There's loads of questions. Maybe if we do it, so moving from lambing to weaning. Question here on finding the sweet spot for weaning lambs on a rotational system. Science found that between 8 weeks and 12 weeks of age, due to the ewes penalising the lambs, have any of the speakers found a similar situation with the sweet spot for weaning?
I might have to ask the questions that your mic's not the best, but did you catch that? So the sweet spot for weaning lambs between 8 and 12 weeks of age. Sometimes, there seems to be a sweet spot between 8 and 12 weeks of age due to the ewes penalising the lambs. Has any of the speakers found a similar situation? So if there's little grass, I guess, is the key.
It depends on pasture availability, so supply and demand. If there's heaps of grass in front of them, actually leaving them there till the 15, 16, 17, 8 weeks might be fine if there's loads of grass. If them lambs are competing with mum for grass, then they get I think after 8 weeks is 80% of the lamb's intake is from pasture. So if the ewes out competing it for pasture and it's not getting that intake, it's going to affect its day live weight gain. So really, as soon as mum's taken that lamb's feed, then she should potentially be off that system, because she's not actually giving it that much at that point. So 10 weeks, 9-10 weeks, if there's no pasture available, get the ewes off.
People argue at that time, like, I don't have the place to put them, I don't have the silage cut by that stage or whatever, but you're still better off prioritising quality for the lambs over the ewes, particularly the fit ewes, where you can put them somewhere else on the farm, forget about them a bit, and
they can eat dust for a month if they need to. They'll be fine.
Good.
And again, it comes back to weighing them. You'll try and make the decision, I guess, before you see their performance tailoring off, where mum is out competing them. But also, if you need to take into account that there's going to be a bit of a weaning check. So, if they're trucking along quite nice and they're getting kind of close to where you want them to be for sale, do you just leave some of them on and take the rest of them off just to avoid that check that can put you back a couple of weeks? So but every year is slightly different, but live weights and grass of it, quality feed availability will dictate where you fall in that period.
I think that's what. And I say, if you've got some that are very close to slaughter, maybe leaving them weaning, and then it's quite important, I think, if you're taking anything off, try and take mum off and leave the lambs there, and there's less stress. So if it's on a grazing system or rotation, whatever you've got them on, they're used to the rotation, they know where the water is, they're eating that pasture anyways. So it's not that stressful a change in environment, it's just the fact that mum's gone. Whereas if you've pulled them in, you've put them in a different part of the farm, on a different rotation or a different type of pasture, there's quite a few things happening. Whereas actually, if it's just the fact that mum's gone, it's one thing they're going to be stressed about, but you're minimising the other things there that will stress them.
Great, thank you. There's 2 people have asked about mixing, so rotationally grazing both cows and sheep together. I realise I'm leaning too much on you, James, but have you done any experience of cows and sheep together?
So we're more leader following now. More mixed graze on the set start, light sort of rotation, just by fields, not really done any mixed grazing cells. Few issues we've seen with very young lambs is just broken legs if they've been charging under cows, or we had it with the autumn herd. So what, they be 7-8 month old calves charging around happy in a field with a load of lambs going past them. So a few little issues. could potentially be sort of exaggerated if they're on a smaller area, because nice day they will charge around and be happy, the calves, and so will the lambs. But that was very young lambs. We're talking like a week or so old. Once the lambs are bigger and stronger, there shouldn't be an issue there. But generally, yeah, I'm leaning more towards leader follower now, just to keep that quality, and the cattle don't need the quality. So the benefit of it would be is if you want to be really strict on that 3 days, because I'm not as strict now. I'm a leader follower from a 2-day shift with the priority group. You've got 2 days with the group coming in behind, so technically you're 4, but then you just browse, get grazing with the first one, so it's not that hard to graze. If you want to be really religious and say, right, only 3, mixed grazing is probably a bit better.
Yeah.
And I say if the cattle are going to be cleaning up alongside them, if it's priority animals like the young lambs, so it is going to be helping the overall sort of ME of the diet for the lambs. But I say you could just take the very top off and have a mob coming in behind to clean it off, which would be, in my opinion, probably more beneficial.
I just realised my background photo is actually showing mixed grazing on rotational grazing. It's a farmer, John Ritchie, I don't know if he's on the line, in Perthshire. So that's his, I think it's his heifers with ewes and lambs, and he seems to get on well with it.
Yeah. Actually, we did some of this there with ram lambs and cattle. It actually wasn't that high a priority stock, and they didn't need as good a performance.
Yeah.
It's a bit scary the first few days when you saw the cattle really, because they were R2s and going mad coming off the beat. You think, I'm going to break a few rams here, but they were all right in the end.
Lorna.
Didn't even realise I had my hand up
Oh,
there.
right, okay. Comments on mixed species grazing?
Yeah, I think it just it's probably a little bit more difficult to manage. You know, when you've got one class of stock, you know how much they're going to eat, so it's just adding a bit more variability into it. But there's no reason why it can't be done, and if it's normally on a set stocked system, you know, just like James says, just kind of mobbing them up a bit and holding them a bit tighter, they'll be used to each other. We'll do it through the summer with heifers, and ewes and lambs are usually that bit bigger. You know, it'd be kind of June, July time, so they're big enough, and yeah, seem to get on fine. Yeah.
Good. There's a question, and I acknowledge this frustration. You guys talked about silage making on Monday. The farmers talked about silage making as an opportunistic way to keep on top of quality. James said you only cut your first silage in September, and it was good quality stuff. But I appreciate some people that are dependent on contractors will struggle with that. So any other ideas on tidying up paddocks, or is it just down to topping? Who would like to take this one first? Other ideas rather than silage making?
I think we covered it quite well last night with the deferred grazing, didn't we?
I think so, yeah.
I think that's a very good tool, and we think actually how I can fit it in my system a bit better. I mean, say we didn't do silage till September this year, so thinking about deferring any grazing in May, June, July wasn't an issue at all for me. But in a usual year, we could have thought about the deferred a bit more. We are pretty mean to our ewes after weaning to keep the condition off them. But if there is excess growth there in sort of peak production, instead of, say, conventionally you get a contractor in, or you go out yourself with the mower and you bale it and you conserve it for the winter, maybe you do just keep a few paddocks and have that in deferred grazing for many of these leaner ewes in September leading up to mating, and it's not going to be as good a quality, but it's going to be enough to be putting condition on. There's kilograms of dry matter there that they need to get the condition on at that time of year, and actually defer it for some priority stock. You've not got the cost of burning diesel and wearing metal to try and conserve it, and you're going to get a use out of it.
Yeah.
The deferred grazing we do is for winter grazing the cattle, so they're on it now with a bale grazing system. Last night they're obviously on about grazing it a lot earlier in the season and the benefits that brought. So actually deferring it for some priority use in September time, you're going to have it at the right sort of season for what we touched on yesterday from New Zealand.
Yeah, it's about focusing in on quality on the main paddocks, and then letting that go and just ignoring it and not worrying about how it looks, I guess, and then utilising it later. Yeah, especially when you've got lots of silage in stock anyways. There's no point cutting more if you don't need it.
Yeah, it's just going to be down to the system. Do you need the silage, or do you need the land back in? Do you need that, those acres back in grass earlier than, can you actually afford to leave them out as deferred? So and a mower is a great way to reset if you get stuck. Try to avoid it, but it's always there. So
but if you're deferring for winter grazing, that's a great tool there to conserve and not have that added feed cost in the winter. And obviously what the touch on last night was grazing earlier, but if you're looking at sort of senior, well, it's not right through the winter on deferred grass, or putting a bale grazing system or something to supplement there with the grass, it's a very cheap outwintering system there. Great for cattle. You could put anything on, probably not as for growing stock if you were looking at the bale grazing as well, but I mean, young cattle would be fine on it.
Yeah. Great. I've got any tips for mix of sheep breeds, so crossbreeds and purebred natives on a small acreage? I don't know if there's much I would say, and it's any different, I guess. The hope is they get used to one another, and the same principles apply, I would say. Unless anyone thinks anything differently.
No, if you like looking at them,
yeah,
they socialize and mingle and seem to get on okay.
Yeah, there should be familiar.
Hundreds of breeds out there. I'm not going to argue what breeds are best, because as a blacky person here, I'm staying out of it.
Yeah.
They have uses when you're catching them. They come with handlebars. So.
Here's a cattle one then. So I rotationally graze my cattle. Problem is, if I poach the ground at all, I have a great dock problem. Is this general, or is this my soil? Yeah, it sounds like you've got...
That's the whole of Wigtonshire. Yeah. Yeah, docks are very, very persistent and will grow in all conditions and store their seed for a very long time in the ground. So they are a big challenge. And I guess there's a tolerance level. Any dock has an impact on the yield of your sward, but with all weeds, weeds, there's a tolerance level. It's what you can live with. Some people can live with a lot, and some people can't live with too many. But they're a real tricky one. We could just do with genetically modifying them to be more palatable.
I'd
be interested to see how deferred grazing might affect them, given the...
I was just thinking, if you deferred grazing, let it go to a seed head, actually start getting your grass seeds in the ground and start adding a bit more diversity of seed in your seed bank there, will there be other things coming away then instead of just the docks, or the docks going to be more prevalent in any situation?
I would say they're so strong, and if you look at their leaf canopy area, they're so competitive with grass, and each dock plant can shed like 10,000 seeds every time it flowers. So it's if you don't want to spray them, it's about topping them or keeping them at a level where they're not setting seed, and just keeping that cycle going, and their seed will stay viable in the ground for 70 years. So once it's there, it's there. So, but yeah, I think they have such a big leaf area to compete with grass to keep growing that I don't know if there's anything that would really outcompete them.
I should say, so we've got a few docks on our experimental paddocks, and I think the key is probably to try and keep the docks in a leafy state and not let them go to seed. So within the cell grazing paddocks, the docks have become a lot less obvious compared to the set stocking. So it's interesting to hear that because of the poaching, that's then increasing the dock content. So I think it's kind of managing and trying to keep the docks at bay through not letting them go to seed.
Yeah, there are Shetland sheep happily eat docks, says Archie Hickler, so thank you for that. Let's just see what else we've got to... So, James, do you see the multi-species sward on your farm becoming an increasingly important part of the whole farm system? And if so, will the grazing management and management of these swards have to be adjusted significantly from your perennial ryegrass clover swards?
Yeah, so I'm up in the amount of multi-species swards I grow. A few reasons for that. I like the sort of seasonal growth pattern of it, as opposed to perennial ryegrass, where it's just boom, bust in May, June sort of time, and then you've not got as good a production the rest of the year. These herb legume lays, they've got a lot more even growth throughout the season, so they've grown a lot better into the summer and the back end. They're keeping the quality an awful lot better as well. And actually, that drought tolerance is quite handy here. The ridge that runs through the middle of the farm is fairly stony, light soil, and we're very exposed to any wind, so it dries out quite quickly. Perennial ryegrass can burn off, so the drought tolerance is quite key, really. In terms of management, they are a bit different to manage. When we were talking about residuals earlier on, it's a bit harder when you start getting more diversity in the lay. Obviously, the more diversity, the more preference you've given the animals then. And especially, we were talking before we came on tonight, if they're grazing from a very young age, have grown up on a naught with these species around, so when they start grazing everything. So them animals, they don't really stop. It's not like we've ever put them on the lay, apart from they've grown up, they've always been on it. Whereas if you sort of put everything on sort of 8-10 weeks or even wean on it, there's a bit of a check there as they get used to grazing them, and there'll be more preference between different species as well. So if you're trying to hit a nice even residual with just lambs, and they want to bear the sandfoin to the floor and they're not touching the plantain and it's sitting at like 25-30 centimeters, it's a bit harder to manage. So mob size and sort of days and paddocks as small cells does help with that. And again, why I'm up in cattle numbers, they're a really good management tool. They just go in and they don't select, they just take it down to a nice even level. They're a very good management tool. I don't want to be topping things. I can't be sitting in a tractor doing that. I'd rather have the cattle do it and get some performance from it. So we are changing our system in terms of what livestock we have to be able to manage it a bit better. And say it's just getting the electric set up, getting more permanent infrastructure in place, so we have that small paddock size. And say once we wean, we can whack massive mobs of lambs together and have a bit more grazing pressure and shorter grazing intervals. So actually, when it is later in the season, they might get a bit more picky. You're not putting them on for too long a time and giving them that preference. But it's not like you need to follow in every system. Maybe if we had two mobs adjacent on a rotation, the cattle could follow for one, then they can follow the next group on the next one, just to help tidy up. So we can be a bit flexible, not trying to hammer that residual every time, as long as there is something coming in and tidying up a good few times a season, just to keep the quality. You get quite a few grazings out of them, say, because of that sort of persistent growth through the summer. It's not like it's perennial ryegrass and suddenly you're extending your grazing quite a bit. And if you're leaving a decent residual even after them followers, you're getting quite good regrowth, and you can get quite a few grazing throughout the season off them. But yeah, sticking more and more in, I see a lot of benefits. If you're going the whole hog on these like GS4 mixes, they're called, so whack it in everything under the sun, there's huge payments there available if you are going down the stewardship route, which more than covers seed cost in the first year in establishment. You're getting 5-year payment for putting all your infrastructure, that'll be paid in the second year. And I say, if you're getting better quality pasture and grow more of it and better livestock performance, they're quite a handy thing to have on farm if you can fit them in.
Caveat to that, not applicable in Scotland, unfortunately.
Is it not? That's a pain. All organic systems, I don't think.
Okay. Sarah, you've got your hand raised.
It was just to make the comment that James made about possibly putting cattle in to follow sheep. Just because of the different mechanism that they use for grazing. Sheep, because they've got such a smaller muzzle, they can go in and sort of nibble the nice stuff, whereas the cattle, they have to kind of sweep up. So they're good sort of follower system, cattle to sort of clean up after, and moving them on regularly, just making sure you've got that grazing pressure to try and reduce the preferential grazing as much as possible.
Well, on the note of leader-follower assistance, John is asking, do you match demand for each class of stock? So for example, if you had ewe and lambs with demand of 500 kilos, for instance, would the cows and calves roughly have the same demand? So the timescale be a day for each, or how do you work it that way?
It would be ideal that, because you're shifting at the same amount of time. So we do roughly try that, but we've chopped and changed a bit with, let's see, we started off with the mob of rams and put the cattle in with them, and then actually we put the rams in front when we wanted to get a bit more sort of priority onto them, and swap them in with some ewes and lambs. So they did alter a bit, but they were roughly, if anything, we'd probably go a bit heavier with the group in front. But it is not essential, because if the demand's smaller on the group in front, they're just getting a lower percentage that's towards and more preference, so they're probably getting more of the top end of what's available there to graze, and you've just got that second mob tidied up. So, and I know Sarah mentioned like cattle are a very good tool. Obviously not everyone has cattle. If you're a sheep only system, dry ewes absolutely fine. And actually we found if you've got more of these lays on farm, they've come across it before. It's not like a lamb that's quite as picky. The ewes, if they've been on plantain, they love plantain, they'll go and whatever's in that mix, they'll generally take it down a lot more even than a young lamb will. And that works fine as a follower, really. But no, if you've got a stock group in front that's got higher demand, they're obviously taking a higher percentage if they're on the same shifts. If it's a lower, they're just taking more of the top end off. So you can, it can be very varied. You could have one taking 10%, one taking 90% if you want to, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to change tack a little bit and talk about the debate of live weight gain per hectare or per head. It does seem to be mutually antagonistic, as Paul puts it. But what's more important can be determined by analysis of return on capital employed. So getting very technical with the KPIs there. Sarah, you're nodding. Would you like to come in on that one? Or sorry.
Might be nodding, but I'm not sure I've got anything to say. So it is kind of seems to be an antagonistic thing, where if you push output per hectare, your individual animal performance suffers. From a sort of return on investment thing, if you're improving your output per hectare, then you're carrying more stock and therefore selling more stock at the end of the day, making more money. But as James said, if that means that you're actually not finishing animals on the cheaper grass and then having to actually house and then feed them to get them finished, then your costs are then just shifting from one part of the farm to the other. So it is a fine balance between prioritizing one over the other. But in terms of a bit of a controversial viewpoint, with the sort of way policy is going in terms of environmental heavily focused environmental payments and having to deliver public goods and biodiversity, etc. If you are able to produce the same amount of kilos of live weight on a smaller area of land, that frees up land on your farm to deliver those other services. Yeah. So it's sort of trying to maximize the efficient use of land, and also then being able to free up land for other services.
You've got to look out ahead a bit.
Yeah, and similarly with your carbon audit, Sarah, it's it's output from the least amount of breeding stock that's most efficient. So
yeah, and there's sort of a very newly emerging sort of way of looking at sort of output in terms of life cycle assessment, so carbon footprints and stuff. They've so far been focused on sort of volume, so kilograms of live weight, or the volume of meat you've produced and stuff, but we've got some work that's starting to actually factor in the nutritional value of foods on a per hectare basis. So if you can produce, a less volume of meat on a hectare, but the nutritional value of the meat is much higher than, say, the volume of beans you'd produce, then because you're providing more nutrition to more people from that meat, then that is seen as better from that point of view. So it's sort of a controversial debate that's slowly happening in the scientific community and might sort of rear its head in terms of industry. So
yeah, they're talking a bit more that way with crops, aren't they? Looking at the quality rather than just yield itself. Yeah. Okay.
I think with Paul's sort of question there as well, that sort of hectare per sort of individual animal, it depends on what you're wanting from them animals as well. If you could go back to lambs because he's lamb mad. If it's you're finishing lambs, you want them off the farm as quick as possible. You want that daily live weight gain. If it's replacement ewe lambs that you don't need to get much weight on and you try to keep them till you tuck them in November, that output per hectare is going to be a lot more beneficial to you because you're not storing them, but you don't have to have that massive gain and they're not leaving your farm the future breeding stock. And again, I keep going about leader followers, but if you've got the modern front that you're looking on your daily live weight gain per head, if that's what you want, prioritize them for your growth. If it's a breeding flock or breeding herd coming in behind and cleaning up to increase that sort of growth and utilization, like it doesn't matter. They're not something that you're trying to get off farm.
Yeah.
You got to look at what you're wanting from them stock classes, really.
Yeah, because of course, if you end up keeping the lambs on farm too long, then you're going to compromise your per hectare performance, your per ewe performance next year, aren't you? Because you're not going to have the feed supply.
Carrying capacity, your scan could be down for the following year of anything. Yeah.
Good, thank you. And I'll see. Yeah, sorry. So back to the paddock debate. Hopefully this makes sense. Is it really just 4 or 8 paddocks? Surely 4 and plus possibly half of another one. If it's been overgrazed, sort this out later. Yeah, that comes back to what we were saying earlier on. If it's been overgrazed, rather than overgrazing it, leave higher residuals to sort out later. I actually was amazed once I saw a dairy sheep flock in northern Spain, and they were on this mob grazing, so very tall, and it was all gone to seed, and it just kind of hurt my brain because I was like, these sheep are, high producing milking sheep, and they're on this sort of pasture, and how's that not impacting the milk tank? They're still milking really well. And the thing was that they're getting choice, so that in the short term they were doing really well. They're also going to be dried off in a month, and then they'd get on top of quality later. So it worked really well. It all just depends on, in the short term, poor quality can work fine if they're given the choice, but you've got to keep looking ahead at managing quality longer term as well.
And that would have to be a real browse grazer. They've just got to cherry pick what they want if you're still looking at the performance there, especially on big, high covers. Like they've just got, I say, you can come back later on when they're drying or see them through the winter, whatever you're doing on that.
Yeah.
But if you're still looking for the performance, don't get too greedy and try and take too much off.
Yeah. I don't know if I've answered your question, Clive. I'm not sure. Something we haven't covered much at all is parasitic worms. So this Daniel emailed saying he recalled that Nematodirus larvae don't climb up the grass much beyond 8 centimeters, and wondering whether there's any influence on like grass height and fluke as well.
There certainly is a percentage is different for different species. Is it 80% below 4 centimeters in grass? Is it of the worm burden?
Okay.
I might be wrong. It's 80%. It is some height. It's just 2 or 4 or something. So if you're leaving that high residual, again, these sort of species, like sort of especially chicory plantain, they've got quite a sort of an erect growth and the ridge at the base of them, so the larva can't actually get up as well. You're leaving a lot higher residual, so you're not actually grazing down into that area where the higher worm burden is going to be.
Yeah.
Sarah's nodding like she knows a lot better than me about this.
It's got to help.
You're just speaking sense. It's fine.
Yeah.
I guess it all kind of comes together with the deferred grazing, potential better water infiltration as well. You're going to have less habitat for the fluke snails and things like that. And with it being taller, I guess it all kind of
It's
can come
also
together.
the rotation length. So the different species will have different lengths of their life cycle.
Yeah.
So if your rotation is long enough to actually break that life cycle, that they can't turn from larvae to the next stage, then that helps as well.
You can get quite big seasonal variation there, though, can't you? So in a dry spell, they'll bury in. So actually, that could suddenly, instead of 21 days, whatever it is, could be 80 days if it's dry for long enough, and then you can have a massive eruption. So actually, there's sometimes when it has been dry for a long time and then wet is maybe just one of the key points to keep an eye on worm burden on farm, and maybe even higher residual with that being a potential issue there.
I think we actually experienced that in 2018. So after the long dry period, we had calves out that were in their first grazing season. Because it was so dry, there was just no worm burden. And then as soon as it started raining about 3 or 4 weeks later, we then had a lot of the calves scouring. So it was just like, the worms are here.
We were, I think, the highest count in 2018 until the end of August was 35 that we had, and then the next one, September, was 1,570 odd. It just shot up.
Yeah, they just exploded.
There was just nothing there. Then suddenly, it's all or nothing.
I think as much as we need to absolutely reduce like treatment of worms, I think it's still a need for monitoring and managing, isn't it? Because grazing can be the worst thing, can't it? So it's just
it can totally coincide with certain life cycles, but there's lots of forecasting information at Scopes will give you kind of forecasting information, and egg counts, feces tests. That's really more sampling and more testing and more data, and
they were poo.
Yeah.
Just another management thing to keep your eye on. Say, we're trying to manage grass to be as best a farmer as we can and utilize it as well as we can. I mean, you can put whatever genetics in place if you're not going to feed it or keep an eye on any sort of potential issues, whether it be health or worm burdens or anything. It's just another thing that you need to have sort of a lid on to be able to get the best performance.
Yeah, and it's just becoming a fact of life, whether it's pesticides or it's animal health products. We're losing actives and we're building resistance. So we have to look at the more cultural methods of control, and ideally before we have backed ourselves into a corner where there isn't something we can go to when things don't go to plan. So that's just the way things are going, unfortunately.
Tom, our previous panelist on Monday, has asked the question: are the panelists planning? Is James planning on adding shelter to the farm to help animal performance / comfort and diversity?
Shelter? Oh, yeah, we're growing a lot of hedge and putting 3.5k a hedge in the last few years. We're putting in a load more, lucky enough to get in another scheme with our stewardship, so we don't get much of a stewardship payment, but I've managed to get a really good hedge and a boundary grant on both the agreements that we've got. So we've got about 12k fencing to go in near the all for either new hedge or coppice and gapping up, and it's long term. I mean, the stuff we put in 4 years ago, it's not shelter yet, it's a bit, but hopefully in 10, 12, 15 years, we'll have a lot more shelter. And Tom's been at the farm, he sees how exposed we are on the top.
Yeah.
Again, I think it was Tom mentioned on Tuesday, every farm's different. You do what suits your farm. We can get away with outwintering on beet and brassicas because of that exposed bit on the top of the farm. It's fairly free draining or at an angle that the water leaves pretty quickly. We could never do that on the heavy fields at the bottom, but we've got woods and shelter down there that we can have young stock on, and we couldn't do that on the top of the farm. So we're kind of tailoring where the winter feed and where the lambing happens with the lay of the land. And we put in as much as we can in terms of hedges and shelter belts, but that's kind of long term, that one.
Yeah. Great. Sounds good. We've had a lot from Jane. Thank you very much for all this detail that you've given us. Seems very encouraging. She's asking, I guess this is a question for you, Sarah. Are there any studies? She's pleased to hear that the nutritional value is being concerned. Are there any studies that also include the value of products such as wool, skins, hides, any other products from sheep and cattle? Often these biodegradable products are used instead of plastic products, which has a big environmental impact. Are you aware of anything on that? Sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds good. I'm not aware of anyone who's doing sort of life cycle or carbon footprint analysis on the production of wool and other sort of byproducts from animals. In terms of the use of byproducts from animals, you know, once you send your animal to the slaughterhouse, then it gets pretty broken down into lots of different products. And as she says, rightfully says, like they're usually used in place of sort of synthetic stuff. But there's the kind of issue of having animal products in stuff, and you know the move away from sort of livestock farming and stuff. But it would be really interesting to have a look at and compare sort of natural products to synthetic products and what the difference would be. But I'm not aware of any research groups doing that at the moment.
I think it's definitely due more of a resurgence with the emphasis being more on microplastics and things.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Poppy, you might know more about this. I was speaking to someone at ADAS today. We've got to do a carbon calculator thing on Monday. AgriCalc was an SRUC carbon calculator, and she thought that was taking wool and things into effect more so than a lot of the other sort of calculators would. I've not looked at it yet, though. I literally got the email through this afternoon, but she seemed to think it was a more in-depth one, especially for looking at sort of output from livestock.
Sorry, Lorna.
It certainly takes into account wool produced. As to the assumptions it makes behind it, I'm not sure you know, where that goes, but it measures that and it identifies as a separate output.
Yeah. Great. Back to grazing. Basically wintering is identified as the problem. So where do the ewes go in the fields when you're resting the paddocks for up to 120 days? So I think you do multiple things, don't you, James? But this Marcus is asking, do people feed them silage in ring feeders and group lots? And what are the pros and cons of that? So the bale type grazing approach.
Yeah, so we do a bit. We used to use a lot of sacrifice fields. Started using beet for the sheep and the cattle a couple of years ago. Before that, we were just feeding out silage, and we were growing a kale swede mix for wintering the ewe lambs on. But basically, whichever field that was going to be the following year was where we used as a sacrifice field. So we were just like 1,200 ewes on a field. There'd just be 8-9 hectares, and gets a bit trashed over the winter, but we're just direct drilled in afterwards. So we basically rested it for 4 weeks waiting for anything to come away, sprayed it off and direct drilled in. And that meant we could rest a massive proportion of our farm and just trash one field. We'd keep the singles on that right up until lambing and pull the triplets and twins off sort of 4 weeks pre. Now put fodder beet in, so the stock's all still on fodder beet at the minute. Cattle on beet and deferred grass, apart from the autumn herds on deferred grass and bale grazing. So still using that silage because we touched on like that excess growth in the more productive parts of the year. We can conserve it. It's quite a common practice here in the UK to conserve it and feed it out the winter, and it's still a good tool to, as we've been touched on, manage that quality when it is grown well and have something in the winter to feed when it isn't. And I say if you can grow brassicas or beet or some sort of forage or defer a lot for the winter on your farm, it is a good tool. But quite often placing them bales out or taking them out is another way to provide forage that you've taken from earlier on the season when it's been grown.
Yeah. Do you ever worry? I mean, you said you only got your cut in September last year. Do you think there'll ever be the time when you're like panicking because you don't have any?
Potentially. Probably should get less stock. We've set up a rearing unit next door to us, so actually we're going to do a bit more with them. So that is a bit more potential. And actually this year we're just putting in a lot more herb legume lays. The thing that got us this year, the same as 2018, was just the amount of stock we had on farm and the drought just stopping my grass growing. So we try and mitigate that a bit. We try and get the more diversity and more drought tolerant plants here. So going forward, it shouldn't be as much of an issue. Growing the crops like the beet and stuff, actually, we know we can sort of what we've got ahead going into the winter. So we'd know quite well sort of in early autumn, late summer, actually what them crops are looking like. And so there is a chance then to study, well, if I know I'm going to panic, we've not made silage, but I've got all this crop, any lambs that are left not going rams or replacements, or just get rid of store, have some of that trade in stock, which just gives you a bit more flexibility. We kind of tied in what we do with rams and stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously we can't get shot at the wall if we're supposed to sell them the next year as a ram, but try and have as much trade and stock as possible with them cull lambs, and up in the cattle numbers a bit now as well. So we sort of doubled the numbers last year, plus took everything on to finishing, whereas we were selling a store at like 10 months. So actually that's to help on the graze management, but it is a stock class there that we can offload if we need to, just to try and give us a bit more flexibility.
Yeah, I think, yeah, one thing, are you looking out ahead in terms of monitoring pasture covers, forecast pasture covers a bit, or is it more like you're looking at the crop on the ground and kind of it's more you've got your eye in a little bit more? Forecast,
yeah. I'm not using FarmAxo, so I could be budgeting an awful lot better than I am. Or fag pack, I'll say fag pack. I've always got a clipboard somewhere next to me, absolutely piled full of notes and calculations, and so it is all sort of calculated, but I say you need to have that flexibility because every season's different. You looked at Angus and Duncan's growth over the last 7 years of using FarmAx, and there's a huge variation between seasons. So, I mean, it is ideal, but you've got to be flexible as well because it's not always going to go to plan.
Absolutely.
And it can be quite a long way off the average when you saw them figures in different years. There's different times of the year when that changes, and but you can wean at different dates. I say, like, ewes can be on dirt this year. You can make silage in September. Like, when you've got that excess growth, take it. When you've not, the priority is the livestock. Then a lot of systems will panic and make silage because that's when they make it every year. I mean, if you're sacrificing your animal performance and then they're on farm an extra 2 months at the back end, it's probably not been the best move.
We've kind of grown up to be silage orientated rather than graze grass orientated, perhaps. It's a bit of a system switch. Yeah. I mean, I take you, sorry, Lorna.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that's where it's good to have a couple of people to bounce your ideas off, isn't it? And just to encourage you to make the bold decision if you are concerned. So yeah.
Absolutely. Having trading stock's key, isn't it? Having these sort of backup plans as you see issues arise, but just being able to, and it sounds like you are able to just be able to make decisions a bit more timely, because the closer you get to the issue, the less options you have, isn't it?
Yeah, and we are limited in some ways. At the minute, there's 1,500 ewes that were lambs that were back fat scanning, so we can't cull any of them until we've got the performance data. And actually, we've started another couple of breeds up, so you end up with a big chunk that you can't get rid of until that data point at sort of 16, 17 weeks. So you are tied in. So actually having more in the B flock and your ewe lambs that are producing fat lambs, more lambs that if you needed, you could get rid of a store, and say having that trade in stock with the cattle as well, and something that's going to fit our grazing, but just add a bit more flexibility.
Yeah. Thank you. Marcus is asking whether you get any welfare issues with the 1,200 ewes on the block that you have trashed, as you put it. And did you have a lieback for the ewes?
Lieback goes quite quickly. Same as on the beet. It depends on the year. We can pull off. So if it got really bad on that, we pulled off onto another permanent pasture field. The last time we did it must have been 18, so it was Beast from the East, wasn't it? I think after that, when it was getting quite wet, we pulled off onto another permanent pasture field. We do strip graze it a bit, so actually we're giving a bit of fresh. So there is a bit normally held back when we're on that system that we could give them if it got really wet. And we moved the feeders right across the field, so every day they were getting shifted, so we weren't feeding at the same site at all. And say when it's dry, like you hardly made a mark on the field, but it's when it's wet that you get the issue. We've more made changes with the cattle actually with what we've got as a lie-back. The beat, we were bale grazing alongside beat. Worked grand in the good weather. When it was wet, they went on last year in November, and that lie-back had gone in the first week. It was just plunged. There wasn't any fresh lie. Every time we moved, it was 10 meters either side of a crop of beat for the bale grazing, which they plunged because the feeders were there. So actually, we'll go in half a field, the third grass, half beat. That just gives you that fresh lie every day. So we'll supplement them with the grass. It means every time they're getting a couple of meters of fence a day, they're getting a couple of meters of lie back. We can back fence. So there's certain strategies you can use to try and mitigate it. Obviously, you can't really back fence as well with a lot of sheep on a small area, but you've got to try and mitigate the problems you're going to get. And it's wet weather's going to be worse. Snow was lovely last week. It was the rain before that was a bit more of a nightmare. With the sheep on the beat now, we've got liebacks right around, so actually we'll start grazing in different directions. So we were grazing for when it got bad, we went to the other side of the field and came, and actually we'd split the field in half so we could go to the bottom and start coming across. So we're on the fourth one now, so you kind of run out once you've used them all up, but you kind of hope it's not wet for too long.
Yeah, absolutely, James. It's about looking at the field that you're choosing for your crop, looking at the slope, looking at the soil types, and looking at the shelter options as well. And just, you don't need to sow the whole field wall to wall. You could sow it in different blocks, and just think about what end you start at as the weather deteriorates or as it's drier. So or graze from both sides. There's lots of different ways to try and mitigate it, but we do need to be, I feel like I'm sounding like the environmental person here. We do need to be very conscious about what we're doing with our soils and water contamination and these outwintering systems. We need to put thought into them to try, a bad spell is a bad spell, but we need to try and kind of mitigate as much soil damage and soil loss, because it's not a good look, and we don't want to end up like New Zealand, where we're being heavily regulated as to how big the buffer strips are, when you've got to have your crops in, what slope, needing resource consent to sow crops. So we need to try and kind of get in front of that curve before we
public perception is really important, but it's not just that. It's quite often you're doing something different to what a lot of the neighbours have done for decades. So it's farmers, it's people in the local village, it's any random Tom, Dick, or Harry that can come past and take a photo and put it on Facebook or Twitter. Like you can't have them in them situations. Say what happened in New Zealand. I know Jim Gibbs was here last year looking at fodder beat, and we direct drilled it, and he thought it was mad because there was a 5-ton a hectare penalty over ploughing it, but we grazed it all winter in the wet with cattle. If we'd ploughed, I don't plough anything here, it'd be an absolute bloody mess. We direct drill or at most min-till any crop that goes in, because the site selection is very important. You've got to have a field you can do it on, and if we ploughed it, it would be a non-starter, just be plunged and horrid, and you'd get runoff. Even through all the wet weather we've had this year, and especially last year, we've never had any runoff leaving the field or anything. You've got to have the site right, and don't think you need the whole field crop, as you said, like a big run back right the way around the field, so you have got that flexibility to jump to the other side, start grazing from the top then the bottom, and because you will need it at some point in the season.
Thank you. We are actually nearing 8:30. I'm just going to read out one of Kalina's comments, because not everybody's going to be able to grow forage crops as well. So Kalina's found it hard to grow forage crops there, and has finally given up as it's too risky if you find you have an added quick crop in September. So silage is her banker, and if anyone follows us, SAC GrazeUp on Twitter, you'll have seen, or Kalina on Twitter, you'll have seen her pictures of her bale, of her silage feeding, all nicely organised. But she needs 600 bales, and so she does feel twitchy if she doesn't have a good proportion made. So it's, yeah, of course I'm kind of probably being a bit cruel by saying we're too silage focused, but if that's what you're banking on, yeah, it absolutely needs to be a priority there.
And there's going to be plenty of systems where cattle or even sheep are still housed through the winter because, you know, forage crops aren't an option, or it's ridiculously high rainfall. So, you know, like we're just like we're saying with grass quality, it's about making quality. If silage is what you need and it's for high priority stock, make high quality silage. If it's for feeding a beef cow, doesn't need to be as good. So it's, you know, it's tailoring what you're making. And if you are in a situation where you make silage and you shut up at certain dates and come out, just, you know, use that aftermath grazing well. You know, we can all still do more with our grass regardless of whether you're going to be making, you have dedicated silage fields or, you know, you're grazing all your grass, but it's about quality feed. And again, that comes back to what Sarah was saying about the carbon auditing tools. The less high quality feed that you put into animals, the more efficient you are with your carbon footprint. So.
The more high
bear
quality.
in mind, yeah,
yeah,
with the silage, as the yield increases, the quality will decrease. So you've got that balance. So, you know, you might think you need X ton of silage, but if you make it a higher quality and say, you know, manage to make silage at 1 ME higher, then, you know, you don't need to still make the same quantity because, you know, a smaller amount of silage will go further if it's higher quality.
Absolutely. Well, I am going to draw discussions to a close there so I don't get in trouble with people's families anymore. But it's been a real pleasure this week, having, you know, spending 4 nights with really exceptional people from across the world, and I'm really fortunate to be able to do this, and I hope our audience agrees and have got something out of it. Please do give us feedback. We're always willing to take on criticism or good feedback. I love good feedback. But please do let us know how it's been for yourselves. And I guess sort of key sort of take homes is, as we started, you know, managing pasture quality is key to high performing animals. Having flexibility, I think we've said the word flexibility over and over again, but making sure you're continually adapting your systems to suit the situation and always having a plan B in mind. And I wish you all the best in your rotational grazing journeys, and yeah, keep in touch. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, James and Jack and Lorna. I hope you've yeah, enjoyed the evening. Thank you.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you very much. Take care, everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks.